We're joined by Gad Levanon, Director of Macroeconomic Research at the Conference Board. Gad, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
So we've got consumer confidence numbers out today. The index fell from 81.8 to 79.9. Not a huge drop. Firstly, put that number into perspective for us.
Right. I would say it's not a good number, but it's not alarming yet. So the present situation component of this index actually kept growing. And the expectation component declined, but it's still in a territory that signals growth. So it's not alarming. It's just not strong.
But what does 79.9 mean? Put that in relation to, say, where we were pre-recession.
Right. So the thing that we should compare to pre-recession is the expectation component. And that is, as long as it's above 80, which it still is, that I think signals economic growth. It's not strong. In general, in this recovery, consumer confidence stayed at quite low levels. So it's still disappointing compared to a regular recovery, but it's not anything alarming yet.
Yet, you say. Do you expect it to be alarming anytime soon?
Well, you know, I think households will be very startled if there is something happening with the fiscal crisis that may happen. The surveys for this release were cut off at September 13th. So that's almost 2 weeks ago. So all the anxiety that builds up towards the debt limit and the budget were not in this survey yet. That's only happened more or less in the previous week. So I think when we get more recent data from the consumer confidence, maybe we'll start feeling the impact of this.
Before we focus on Washington and the big showdown and impasse over the budget, what were the main concerns of consumers in this most recent survey?
Right. So 3 out of the 5 questions in this index are related to the labor market. And I think the softening of the labor market and the continued very weak growth in wages, I think that's the main concern. Despite the 4 years of recovery, wages are growing at historically low rates, and that, I think, is impacting the purchasing power of households.
Now let's focus back on Washington and the standoff over the budget battle there. How do you think that's going to be resolved, and what kind of impact do you think this is having on consumers and businesses and investors in the interim?
Right. It's hard to tell. I would say that the developments are disappointing. If a few months ago the worst case scenario was another year of sequester cuts, now it seems like it's the best case scenario. Worse than that would be a government shutdown or some startling of the financial markets as a result of the debt limit. I think the probability that one of those things will happen is quite large. So I think if we just end up with one more year of sequester cuts, that would be actually a good outcome. Now, the impact of that could be quite large depending on what happens. Its impact on employment, on especially government spending is going to be quite large. So we will see. It's really hard to tell.
Yeah, a lot of uncertainties looming on the horizon. Now let's focus on what we do know, and that is that the U.S. housing recovery does seem to continue quite strongly. The S&P Case-Shiller Home Price Index shows that home values rose the most in 7 years, but we are starting to see the rate of appreciation declining. Are we reaching a peak there?
I think there will be some softening in the housing market. So the most leading indicator of housing, which is mortgage applications, that after the increase in mortgage rates plummeted. Refinancing declined by 60–70%, but even purchases, mortgages for purchases, declined by about 10–15% and doesn't seem to bounce back. I think this is very concerning. I think it's one of the things that the Fed is worried about, because housing became the strongest engine for the U.S. economy. And if that doesn't continue, the U.S. economy will be in trouble. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if we'll see some more weakening in the housing market.
Well, we're seeing a decline in the application for mortgages because mortgage rates are on the rise. Where do you expect mortgage rates to go over the next 6 months and 1 year?
Well, I think it depends a lot on where the Fed goes. And I think with so much uncertainty with the government, I think the Fed will be reluctant to taper in the October meeting and maybe even later. So it all depends on what's happening in the government. I think that was the main reason why the Fed decided to postpone the tapering.
Right.
If there is no good resolution of that, I don't think that they will taper anytime soon.
Back to the hands of the Fed. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Levanon, Director of Macroeconomic Research at the Conference Board.